Good morning. We are here today to discuss Parshas Tzav, as well as the upcoming holiday of Pesach. In all likelihood, we will either not do a Wednesday morning class Erev Pesach next week, or I will post a brief recording because there's so much going on that day for so many of us getting ready for Pesach. So as I said, we're discussing Parshas Tzav, and the title for today's shiur is Enthusiasm is the Key. Classes for this month, the month of Nisan, are lovingly sponsored by an esteemed group of great admirers of Ohad Fryda on the occasion of his marriage to Gal Goddessman Mazel Tov this past Thursday night. It was an absolutely beautiful wedding, and this group of admirers are Dr. Joel and Danit Finkelstein, Rabbi Aaron and Malka Levy, Rabbi Chaim and Rena Zweig, Jacky and Nechama Zweig, Gidi Fihrer, Avi Goldblatt, Yonasan Zweig, Nathan Rosenberg, and Noah Booker, among many others. This week's class is dedicated for a Refu'ah Shlomo for Sura Rivka bas Fryda, Perel Sasha bas Meril Rivka, Shlomo ben Baila, Malka Sarah bas Faiga Rachel, Simcha Isaac ben Etel Bluma, and Moshe ben Simcha. This week's class is also dedicated to nishmas Chaim Shmuel ben Meir Tzvi. This is the father of one of the parents of one of the Bachrim in the yeshiva. We wish that his neshama should have an aliyah, and the whole family should be a source of merit for this neshama, and there should be continued nachas in their family. Just want to make a mention that Ohad and Gal's wedding was beyond beautiful. There was a tremendous atmosphere of love and appreciation. We very much appreciate everything Ohad does for our shiurim. He has facilitated many thousands of shiurim, actually over many years. A man ahead of his time. We wish tremendous happiness and nachas for him and Gal and their marriage and their future together. So we are definitely living in historic times with everything that's going on in Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, and the repercussions around the world. We need to ask ourselves, what should be our mindset here in Pesach 2026? Tafshin Pei Vav. We have unbelievable things that are occurring. I'm sure most of you by now have heard of the attack of the underwater submarine manufacturing plant in Iran that was recently attacked. I didn't even know it existed. I don't know if everyone else knew it existed. But just what's going on with all the machinations and all the both terrible things that are still happening in terms of attacks from Iran, and I'm sure everybody's heard about the ambulances of Hatzalah that were set on fire in London. There's so much in the world that is happening, and of course, no surprise to us on the class, the Jewish people are at the epicenter. And just like in the story of Pesach, the Jewish people were at the epicenter, and it created absolutely cataclysmic shockwaves throughout the civilized world in that time. I think it's very important, truly important, that we think about the opportunities that are at hand. What does the Torah, what does Hashem say that we should be thinking and specifically improving at this time? Because there's so much in the balance. If we're really aware of the historic moment, it's many evil regimes in the balance. It's the whole fight between secularism and the notion that there is a one God that is very much in the balance. Obviously, I don't mean chas v'shalom in the balance that there's any question about the truth of one God, but people recognizing that and living that, and the world becoming a much more sane and civilized place. And Pesach is the beginning of it all. So we really need to think about what is the Torah highlighting for us to think about in this very, very precarious moment. So I would like to begin by discussing what one of our class participants noted this past Friday in our class, and that is that Iran seems to be experiencing a denial of biblical proportions, and by that I mean Egypt. What is happening with the whatever regime it is, whatever are the people in charge that nobody can figure out, whoever's calling any shots over there, they seem to be in continuing denial of what's happening to them and the fact that they are getting decimated, and even if they can cause some damage and kill some civilians, that should not seem to be a reason to continue, given everything else that's going on. So that's a very important parallel to acknowledge. In addition to that, I would like to point out that it's kind of strange that so many countries have not joined the fray, even though they continue to talk about it a little bit more. And again, the Jewish people were all by themselves in the Pesach story. It's not like anybody came over their hundreds of years of servitude to liberate them. And I would also like to point out that just in terms of Pesach itself, are the questions that we ask on the Pesach Seder relevant to what's happening in Egypt? So, for example, should we be asking, what is this? Like the simple son is asking, like, what's going on? Should we be asking, like the wise son asks, okay, there's a lot going on. What is everything that Hashem wants us to learn? What are the eidos, the chukim, the mishpatim that Hashem, our God, has commanded you? And then finally, I would like to focus just on some Pesach overview questions, and then we'll go to our Parsha. So, for example, Pesach is a night of questions. Why? May I ask the question why? Why should we focus on the questions? Why not get some answers? A lot of people like answers. Number two, what is the ultimate goal of the Pesach Seder, and what are the key takeaways? So to elaborate on that point a little bit, there's several practices, especially that people who are meticulous about the Passover observance, there are several practices that happen these 2 nights of Pesach here that we call Seder nights outside the land of Israel, and the one night that is celebrated inside the land of Israel. And it's a little complicated. There are 4 cups of wine. There's a certain amount of matzah to be eaten at different times. There is the maror. We dip it in the charosas. We have the salt water and the vegetables. We're supposed to eat a festive meal. There's a lot of words to say recounting the story on some level of Egypt. So if I ask us, what is the goal of the Pesach Seder? I think most people think the goal is to make sure we're supposed to do all these various details correctly. But the problem with that is we don't need an organized book to do it. We could just simply do them. And if we look at the book that we call the Haggadah, it does not conclude with any of these observances. Most of these observances are done prior to the festive meal, and then we do a couple more cups of wine and we eat the afikomen at the end of the festive meal. But then we have this whole section called Hallel and Nirtza, praising Hashem, and Nirtza, which just needs explanation. What is it? It's more songs. How is it different than Hallel? It means appeasement or reconciliation. What's it about? And why not begin with Hallel? We say Hallel in Shul. Many people have a custom, even at night, to say Hallel in Shul. We say Hallel all the days of Pesach. So obviously it's important to praise Hashem, thank Hashem for this freedom. Why are we doing it again at the Seder? Why is it at the end of the Seder? And what is Nirtza? And one would normally presume that when you get to the end of the book, now you understand the whole story. We've hit the climax and we fully explained it. How are Hallel and Nirtza a fitting conclusion for the Pesach Seder? And of course, we could also ask the question, what's the importance of having this word Seder, which means order or organization? Why do we only have it on Pesach? We don't have it on Shabbos or Yom Tov of other holidays. As my father points out, every holiday and every Shabbos, we sing songs before or we sing songs in the middle. We have Kiddush, we have washing, we have Hamotzi, we have a meal, we say Torah, we have benching. These are all steps that would seemingly be part of the Seder, but yet it's only on Pesach when we have the Seder. So I'd like to get to some fundamental concepts about all of this, in addition to one more major Pesach theme, and this really needs a deep explanation, and it's called the concept of chipazon. Chipazon means hurriedly, seemingly in an almost harried state, where it's kind of a befuddlement, we're hurried, we're anxious. That's what the Torah says is the way that we need to eat the Pesach offering. Isn't that fascinating? In Egypt, we are told, "Va'achaltem oso b'chipazon." Eat it with chipazon, Pesach ula Hashem. It is a Pesach for Hashem. Let me actually take a moment here and find you that reference. I apologize for not doing this before, but here it is. Let me read you the whole thing. This is chapter 12, describing the eating of the Pesach offering. It says, eat the meat this night roasted with matzos and bitter things. Don't eat it raw or cooked in water, but only roasted, like whole roasted. Don't leave any of it over until the morning. And this is how you should eat it. Your thighs should be girded, so wear a belt. Your shoes should be upon your feet. Your stick should be in your hand. Your stick should be in your hand. And you should eat it b'chipazon. What is chipazon? B'vehilu, says the Onkelos. B'chala is a word, for example, that's used in the Megillah when it says that they hurried to bring Haman for the second party. That's the word. Vayavhilu lehaviyas Haman. They hurriedly, in a very harried and almost scary state, to eat, to bring Haman to the second party. That's the way we're meant to eat the Korban Pesach. Fully dressed, with our sticks in our hands. I mean, just picture it, right? Your stick is in your hand. You're eating it quickly. Your shoes are on your feet, like you're ready to walk out the door. Why? And there I point out, we weren't allowed to leave the house until the morning anyways. So what's the deal, people? Right? We're not allowed to leave the whole night. Well, we're supposed to dress, supposed to eat it quickly, and then we're just supposed to stay like this for 6 hours or 10 hours. Can we get undressed and go to sleep if we want? Like, what's the story with eating it this way? And you might say, well, okay, that's one detail. It's not so important, whatever. But the truth is, we're commanded to remember this. We're commanded to remember that it was b'chipazon that we left Egypt. So this is a very big theme of the holiday, and it needs a great explanation. Okay, now, moving to Parshas Tzav. Parshas Tzav, which is the second of the Parshios in the book of Leviticus and Sefer Vayikra, in this volume, the Torah does a lot of detail on the offerings. We're not going to go into most of the details of the offerings here in the Parsha. I'm not even going to do really an overview. We should just know that many of the offerings that were discussed in the Parsha of Vayikra last week are now discussed here in Parshas Tzav in more detail about the specific ways in which the offerings need to be processed. And so it's really an instruction manual more for Aharon and the Kohanim than the rest of the Jewish people, because most of these details, yes, it's a mitzvah to learn about it, but the ones who were commanded to actually perform these processes were the Kohanim. So that's what Parshas Tzav is primarily about, in addition to the 7 days that were the inaugural days before the Mishkan was erected. That's what this Parsha is about. So there's a lot to be discussed on that, such as, for example, why are we going through the 7 days of inauguration, which really precedes Parshas Vayikra in the timeline? Why is that mentioned over here again? Which is a fair question. We're probably not going to touch on it except for maybe a little bit. But now we have the opening paragraph of the Parsha. And the opening paragraph, and the reason that it's called Tzav, is because Tzav means to command or to instruct. And over here, it says, command Aharon and his children, saying, this is the law of the Olah. Now, unless a person is reading the Parsha carefully, a person might think that this is the law of the burnt offering. And that's not really what it's talking about. Normally, we translate Olah as the burnt offering. That's not really what it's referencing. What it really means by Olah over here is that this is the law of everything that goes up to be burned on the altar of any offerings. So it's not the law of the burnt offering, it's the law of the burnt things that apply to all offerings. That's really what the paragraph is discussing. And so we're going to explain a little bit more about that. And the Torah basically says it can burn all these things that are the things of all offerings that are meant to be burned. They can be offered the entire night. That means that it can sit on the altar the entire night and burn until it turns to ashes. So this paragraph also deals with the fact that there are times that the Kohen needs to remove ashes from the altar and put it next to the altar, and that is a process to be done every day. And in addition to that, sometimes there's a big pile of ashes next to the altar, and sometimes the Kohen needs to take those ashes outside the camp and just leave it outside. Okay, so that's what the first paragraph discusses. So Rashi over here brings a very interesting teaching, and it's the subject of much discussion among the commentaries. Rashi says that the language of tzav, which is the root word of mitzvah, means not only to command, but it connotes alacrity and meticulousness. It's a very not simple word to translate. The word I'm trying to translate right now is zerizus. Zerizus is sometimes seen as quickly. It's sometimes seen as alacrity. It's sometimes seen as carefully, with conscientiousness. It's not such a simple word to translate. So that's one more connotation of the word tzav, this word zerizus, zealousness, alacrity, meticulousness. And then there's also immediacy and for all generations. So those are the three terms that Rashi uses to describe quickly and zealously and meticulously, one, immediately, meaning don't push it off at all now, and two, for all generations. And then Rashi finishes his comment by quoting Rabbi Shimon, who says that the Torah emphasizes more this concept of zerizus, which we just explained, wherever there's a loss of money. Wherever there's a loss of money, the Torah goes out of its way to say meticulously, carefully, quickly, so to speak, immediately, and also for all generations. Now, the Ramban asks the very obvious question, Nachmanides. He says, what loss of money are we talking about here? We're talking about all the things that go up on the altar, like I just explained. Who puts these things up on the altar? The Kohen, as we explained, Aharon and his children. This is not their money. They're not losing any money here. If they bring it on the altar quickly, zealously, meticulously, with alacrity, immediately for all generations, that has nothing to do with their money. So what is Rashi talking about, loss of money? That's Nachmanides' question. For this, he actually says Rashi is misunderstanding, he's misapplying or misreading the rabbis, and he gives his own explanation to what Rabbi Shimon is talking about. It's really talking about other things, or maybe it's referring to one offering that the Torah does mention over here that the Kohen brings, and his offering was completely burned, so there's a loss of money. That's what Nachmanides says. But the truth is he's very bothered, and therefore he has no explanation of Rashi, so it's our job to come up with some sort of explanation for Rashi. So what in fact does Rashi mean that there's a loss of money over here if it's the Kohen bringing all of these things that are meant to be burnt on the altar? Okay, in addition to that, I'd like to ask, we have this word tzav all the time in the Torah. We have it many places. So why is this the one place where Rashi tells us this deeper explanation? It doesn't only mean a commandment, it also means alacrity, zealously, meticulously, quickly, immediately, and for all generations. This is a word that appears many places in the Torah. We have a parsha earlier in the Torah called titzaveh, which also means to command and to instruct. And so we should have the same concept. So I can't really necessarily answer this question perfectly, but at least we'll try to learn from here why this is a foundational place to explain it. So what I'd like to do is begin with one last comment on the Pesach, explain why this topic between Pesach and our Parsha is so connected, and that's from a different teaching of the rabbis, which comes in Parshas Bo, which says, Ushimartem es hamatzos, which means you should guard the matzos. And over here, we're all familiar probably with this thing called Shemura matzah. Shemura matzah means matzah that the wheat was guarded from the time it was harvested to make sure that it would not become wet. So therefore, there would be no natural leavening happening from the contact of the wet with the wheat. And so that matzah is called shmura matzah. We pay a premium for it. We pay a premium for matzah. We pay a premium for kosher food. So we pay a lot of premiums. But the bottom line is that's what shmura matzah is. And it says in the Torah, you should shomer, guard the matzah. So therefore, it's called shmura matzah. But the rabbis say that in addition to that basic meaning, it's also referring to ushemartem es mitzvos. You should guard the commandments. doesn't just mean matzos, it means mitzvos. And the rabbis are pointing out that it's obviously not a coincidence that the word matzos and the word mitzvos is the same word with an extra vav, but the truth is oftentimes the vav is dropped. So it's very legitimate to read the word matzos as mitzvos. And the Torah is specifically telling you, you should guard the mitzvos. Don't be in a circumstance where you have an opportunity to do a mitzvah and you delay doing it because then you turn the mitzvah into chametz, either like leavened bread on Pesach, which is anathema, we're not allowed to have that, or from the language chimutz, which also happens to be vinegar or spoiled. So don't squander the opportunity to do a mitzvah by putting it on delay, because if you do so, then you're going to turn it into something negative, like chametz, unleavened bread on Pesach, or vinegar, which is something spoiled. So, point is that the word tzav and the word matzah and the word mitzvah are all the same word. So now we get sort of a connection between matzah and tzav, our parsha, but also a connection in this concept of quickness, like we have with chipazon, which is that we need to eat the korban Pesach and the matzah and the maror of the korban Pesach very quickly. So we have these connections. Now we're going to come back to that teaching and go into it in great detail. I'm excited to share with you some brilliant insights from my father on that teaching, and then we're going to elaborate on that a little further and come back to our main idea. But here's the starting point. The starting point is, I'm sure most of you have heard this before, that inertia is the most powerful force in creation. Right? The concept of inertia is that an object that stays in motion will stay in motion unless acted upon by an opposite force, and an object that is not in motion will stay not in motion as part of inertia also, because it's not in motion. So we'll stay not in motion unless it's acted upon by a different force, which is motion. So I would like to suggest that what the Torah is really highlighting here is the opposite of the basic human tendency. The basic human tendency is I do it because this is what I always did, or I don't do it because I never did it before, which is not really a good reason to not do or do anything. And that's the basic human condition about everything. So that is actually what slavery is all about. Being enslaved means we are victim to our own non-thinking and to our own inertia processes. Even, for example, to think about overthrowing an evil regime, that takes a huge amount of energy. That takes a huge amount of thinking and acting and doing. And of course, people are going to always resort to the easier mean, right? If these evil regimes would only figure out a way to get their constituents food and electricity, it might not be so dangerous for them. But that's their failing, and now the people are given so much energy and reason to take action that they sometimes take action. And that is very difficult for people. So even though people lived under the evil regime of Iran for decades, and Cuba for decades, and Venezuela for decades, life is hard for things to change. We'll just keep the status quo because as unbearable as it is, the change is much harder. At least that's the concept. And that's usually what happens in people's state of inertia thinking. And so what the Torah is telling us specifically about Pesach, which is the seminal moment for human freedom and the ultimate genesis of change as opposed to creation. Creation, that's God's business. God created a genesis, right? So he does the creation. But what human beings can do is they can instigate change, but that is very, very challenging, and it contravenes the laws of inertia. Says the Torah, you need to understand that if Hashem is giving you the opportunity to be free from Egypt, you need to get used to the idea that things are meant to evolve and change constantly. You need to be running towards that. You need to get yourself into an almost frenzied state to gear yourself up for that, because otherwise you will stay victims to inertia. Now, there's a study from Psychology Today from probably 2 decades ago that I saw various common characteristics of happy people. And one of the common characteristics of happy people is that they constantly put themselves into new and uncomfortable situations. It's just an amazing concept by itself. Unhappy people, they keep the status quo. Happy people, they keep changing the status quo, even and especially into uncomfortable environments or activities. Why? Why does that make a happy person? Because as much as inertia is the natural state of a human being, the infinite quality of a human being is much more comfortable with actual growth and development and going from level to level upward. That's a much more satisfying state for the spiritual and godly part of a human being. So the idea of chametz is as follows. Here, the water came into contact with the wheat, right? If there's no contact between the water and the flour, no chametz is happening. Once there's contact, now it automatically has a chemical reaction where it will naturally evolve by itself, like the energy has been introduced, that it's going to leaven, at least to some extent. With yeast, all the more so. Now, if we just let it go, it'll become fluffier and more delicious flour and water that we call bread. But if you act upon it, so then you retard that development, and now it is going to be baked, quickly, then it just becomes a cracker instead of a delicious bread. But that takes action. So the goal of the lesson of chametz and matzah is don't just let things go, act upon it, and make sure that you think about acting upon it so that you don't just go with the status quo. But you might argue, hey, it's more delicious. That's true. But you have to know why you're doing things. It might be more delicious if you just let it go. But is that what's better? Or is the idea that I take action in order to get out of Egypt more important than delicious bread? What's more important? If we ask ourselves what's easier, it's easier to just stay where we are, not bother with, the crackers. Let's just stay in Egypt. Let's not leave. Let's not go through all that change. Egypt has already stopped oppressing us. We've stopped, being slaves. We could just stay here, like the 4/5 of the Jews that wanted to stay in Egypt. But that's not what freedom is about. Freedom is about engaging your brain and thinking about what is the most important action that I can take that can lead to true self-development and growth. That's what freedom is all about. And says the Torah, if you're going to have the Pesach offering in Egypt, and your idea is that you're going to recline and you're going to sit back on your couches in Egypt, and you're going to have a merry old time with the Egyptian God, chewing it and, appreciating its deliciousness. But if it's not part of leaving Egypt, then you're not getting the message. You have to understand that the reason that you're slaughtering the gods of the Egyptians, these paschal lambs, is in order to show that this is a lifestyle that you are distancing from, and what you're choosing instead is to engage in action, in taking the paschal lamb and slaughtering it and not being satisfied with just that, but wanting desperately to get out of Egypt and to live a brand new paradigm in a relationship with Hashem. And you have to be eagerly seeking that. And you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because a lot of growth is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Just like that dirty word that we call exercise. You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable if you want to benefit growth. That's the bottom line. And so therefore you can't eat it without your shoes on, without your belt skirted, and just casually and in a relaxed state. You need to eat it like you're desperate to get out of the inertia of the couch potato, of the secular thinking, this is the way it is, this is what I always do, this is what I know, this is what I'm comfortable, hopefully it'll work out, not too bad. And if I don't suffer just horribly, and I'm not starving to death, then I can handle it. Which is what so many people are currently experiencing in this world. And if not for the United States and Israel waking up to the threats that Iran portrays, right, that what their ultimate designs are, and if not for taking action against them, the whole world would be again under the terror regime, which forces people into a status quo way of thinking just to be comfortable, like drinking and, hoping for the best as the Titanic goes down. That is the opposite of the Pesach story. So therefore, it's no coincidence that the rabbis say, if you guard the matzos, that means if you acquire a mindset of being aware and asking yourself, what is the action that I should take? Should I sit back and take it easy, let it go, let it be chametz, just kind of hang out in Egypt? Or should I take the mindset of, no, this is not the life that I want, just to be a couch potato and a depressed human being, but and a person that doesn't develop themselves towards a higher, both spiritual and fulfilling level, so then you're not capable of the mitzvos. See, it's the same thing, really, right? If you understand that life is filled with opportunities to develop and grow, and that you're willing to be alacritous and to take action and to immediately engage and to not allow yourself into laxity and laziness, then you'll keep all the commandments. And if not, you won't keep any of the commandments. Not really. So, come along the rabbis and say that you need to guard the matzos and the mitzvos. And it's really the same exact thing. And then they say, if instead, when it comes to a mitzvah, you take your sweet time, and you really don't do it right away, and you just say, okay, I'll do it later, I can do it tomorrow, I can do it, I can put on tefillin for the next 4 hours, I don't need to put on tefillin now, right? I can do chesed, I can help a poor person a little bit later, I don't need to do it now. What you're really saying is that you're not seizing with enthusiasm the opportunity to develop yourself and to grow into a relationship with Hashem. And you know what happens? Then you begin to feel burdened because you don't want to do it. And you begin to resent it. Says my father, to do something with resentment is actually worse than not doing it. Because when you do it with resentment, then what you're actually doing is making yourself feel negative about Hashem instead of just don't do it. And so therefore it's worse. It becomes chametz to do it on delay and with resentment than to not do it at all. So asked my father, if that's true, what's a person supposed to do? Should they not do it at all? Should they do it with resentment? What's a person supposed to do? So my father explains what a person is supposed to do is incentivize themselves. Make it a delicious experience for yourself. If it's a child, give them candy. If it's yourself, give yourself a pat on the back and brag about it and give yourself honor. My father says every adult loves the lollipop of honor. Whatever it takes, buy yourself something special. That is the way to incentivize yourself. But of course, what's really the subtle and sublime truth of it all is if we remind ourselves that we're becoming dignified, we're becoming elevated, we're going to be more fulfilled, we're going to be happier if we engage enthusiastically in a relationship with Hashem. Of course, that's what we should really do. So it's not that I have to put on tefillin. I want to put on tefillin. I want to feel that connection. Not that I have to light Shabbos candles on time. It's if I light Shabbos candles on time, there will be tranquility and harmony and the divine presence in the house, and that will be feeling so much better for everyone. That's what we have to really be thinking. Now, the truth is that in every love relationship, I'm just going to say it straight out, we spend a lot of money. And if we're not spending a lot of money, we're probably not really in a real love relationship. Because between the time, the money, and the effort, we are using all of our resources, whether it's for our spouse or it's for our children, whether we're a man and for our wife and a wife for a husband, we are investing and investing and investing with no thought really about what it's costing. And if we're thinking about what it's costing, we have a problem. That's the truth. And here we have all of these offerings, so much of which are burnt up. Whether if it's a burnt offering, it's all burnt up. And if it's a different kind of offering, much of it is burnt up. And we have this requirement to make sure that it's fully burned and it turns into ashes. That's what the first paragraph is talking about. So says Rashi, it seems like a waste. This is important. And the answer is because it's in the pursuit of a closer connection with Hashem, which we explained in last week's parsha, in Parshas Vayikra, that we're looking for connection with Hashem, and we're looking to make ourselves uncomfortable with disconnection from Hashem. It's worth every last penny, and we should be doing it enthusiastically. There's nothing that will be better for us than connecting on a higher level to Hashem, and there's nothing that's better for our relationships than getting closer and closer. And every compliment you give, and every dollar you spend, and every task you do to help the other person brings you closer. And if you do it resentfully, it brings you further apart. And if you do it resentfully, you're not growing in connection, and it will be less fulfilling. But if you do it with enthusiasm, of course you're going to do it right away. Why would you be on delay? That is not fulfilling. That is not edifying. That is not elevating. And so, of course, we do it right away. And more importantly, we know that it's good for all of our future generations. The closer that a husband and wife are with each other, the more that the love is real, the better it is for the children. The more the children will be healthy, the more they will build their own future generations. The closer we are with Hashem, the more we invest in that relationship and don't think about what it's costing for the shmura matzah, what it's costing to do a Pesach Seder for 20 people. I can't believe it cost me X, right? Then we're not pursuing the relationship and the connection at all. And when we are, of course, we're going to do it carefully. Of course, we're going to do it quickly. Of course, we're going to do it immediately. Of course, it's going to be good for all of our generations. And then we'll be committing not only to this action of the Pesach Seder, but to actually all of the future opportunities of connection with Hashem, like every mitzvah. So when it comes to why did we have to leave Egypt in this way, and why do we have to remember? Because we have to understand God, just like then, is today giving us an even greater opportunity to connect with him. But are we showing that enthusiasm? Are we barely appreciating it? Are we tremendously appreciating it? The goal of the Pesach Seder is to burst out in song and in ecstasy that we get to be in this sublime relationship with Hashem. And thank God, and I mean it so sincerely, we are not the morons of the universe that think that it's good that the evil regime should have nuclear power. Thank God that is not the way that we think. Thank God we are free from the tyranny of thinking that the best thing that we can hope for is to keep the powers on top somewhat mollified, and hopefully we can not get terrorized, which is what many people resort to. That is the law of inertia instead of the law of action and proactivity. That is the difference between running out of Egypt with enthusiasm and even with discomfort to show that we're not comfortable to be here, showing that that's what eating the Pesach is all about, and that's the difference between the Jews that left and the Jews that stayed behind. And so it's our opportunity today to really think tremendously big picture and enthusiastically about what it is Hashem is providing for us. And I can tell you here in Florida, there's tremendous opportunities for development and growth. Florida is the place to be for Jews in America, both fortunately and unfortunately, because it would be great if other states would be as comfortable. But there's a lesson in that too. We've become too comfortable in America. We're not focused enough on Jewish education and building the next generation and making sure that we're really building the Jews of the future and what Hashem wants in this world, which is a nation to express the enormity of the opportunity to have a relationship with him that is sublime. And so we have to do much better with that. And we have opportunities here. We have opportunities across the world and in Eretz Yisrael. Are we approaching it with enthusiasm, or are we just going to take the short-term win of hopefully a weakened Iran? Or are we really going to engage in the freedom that we want to be free of the nonsense of the secular ideologies, and we further commit to throwing all of our time, all of our resources, all of our efforts into growing a connection with him, which today largely means building the families and the educational institutions of our Jewish future. Are we going to do that or not? Becomes the question, in my opinion, humble opinion. And I hope that it also just reminds us about the opportunity of every mitzvah that we have is another opportunity to commit to this connection relationship with Hashem. The more enthusiastically we do it, the more it will build the relationship and the long-term future. Let's do questions or comments. Ethan, please.
Amazing message. I wrote down a bunch of notes to bring up at my Seder, so I appreciate it. I do have a question. If we're commanded to eat the Paschal lamb with hipazon, how do we reconcile that with also the commandment at the Seder? We're supposed to act like kings. We're supposed to have the pillow and lean to one side and luxuriate in the Seder. Are they? I guess we no longer do the Paschal lamb. Is that why the two are able to coexist, or am I misunderstanding that?
So you said today we don't have the Paschal lamb, and your question is?
We're instructed in one part to eat it hurriedly, but then at the Passover Seder, we're instructed to eat like kings and queens. We're supposed to have a pillow and luxuriate in the experience.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. My suggestion to answer that question, which is a very, very good question, and it's similar to another set of questions that can also be asked, the difference between Passover in Egypt and today, and that is that once we have the Torah is the mechanism by which we learn proper proactivity, proper enthusiasm, proper, getting ourselves uncomfortable to grow. That's once we have the Torah. It's when we don't have the Torah that, which was the story in Egypt, that this needed to set the tone for the future.
Got it.
And what we do is we remember, and Ari is saying we want both alacrity and savoring today, because today there's a lot to savor because we have had the Torah, I think. So I think that also is a very excellent point that Ari is making. But I think that the main thing is to understand that what catalyzes the growth, meaning the main thing that Pesach is reminding us, that what catalyzes the growth is the discomfort. And we need to remember that day.
Thank you.
Excellent point. And while we're on that subject, let me just answer. That's why questions are so important. A lot of people really don't like questions because it's uncomfortable to not have answers and uncomfortable to think. And that's across the board, whether it's in therapy, people, a long time don't want to deal with questions, or whether it's questions about how things work, people, it can really make a person uncomfortable. And of course, that's the key to growing. And so Pesach is all about more and more questions.
I was actually thinking when you mentioned that earlier that I found the new way that people are going to be anti-Semites. They're going to say that we created AI because Jews naturally ask such good questions, and that's how you really take advantage of AI, is asking better questions to the AI. And they're going to say, see, the Jews are behind the AI because they know how to ask such great questions.
Listen, you're agreeing with the Haggadah. In every generation, including the AI generation, they're going to stand up against us. You're right. Thank you, Ethan. Rabbi Yechiel?
2 points. Again, we come back to the famous thing with Moshe Feinstein. You see now how destructive it was to come home every day, and how difficult it's to be a Jew. Parents should have come home. It's how wonderful it is to be a Jew, and that's how we should be speaking in general.
Absolutely true.
And number 2 is you answered now a very difficult question I've always had, that we look in the pasuk says you're supposed to say Krishma when you get up and when you go to sleep. But you see this phenomenal dichotomy in the halacha that when it comes to getting up, well, hello, whenever I get up, it says, no, you have to get up. There's this man to go, and this man to Mogen Avram has to be, and you're supposed to say Krishma by when it's Nechama, by the sunrise. And it comes to sleeping, you can say Krishma when you go to sleep. You can say it the whole night. And the answer is because in the morning is when you're supposed to jump out of bed in order to serve the Almighty. The daytime is when you're supposed to serve Him. That's why Krishma must be as early as possible. Well, the nighttime is when you're going to sleep. You actually can delay that. I'll say Shema later because I want to get a connection with Hashem.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that addendum. Really nice. Thank you. Thank you, Raphael. Awesome. So I'll encourage everyone to please head over to my father. I believe that my father is just saying in class today. I did not confirm that, but I'm hoping yes. And like I mentioned, next Wednesday, the plan will be either I'll post the Devar Torah, or we will not have anything. And lastly, we will have a Friday class this week, and hopefully we'll have a Wednesday class on. One second. Is Chol Wednesday night? No, Wednesday morning. No, that's it. That's it until after Pesach. Okay. Have a great day, everyone.
I would add that it's schwer zu sein a yid. It's also schwer zu sein to exercise and schwer zu sein to eat healthy.
Excellent. Excellent. Great job. Great job, Barry.
Thank you, Rabbi.
That makes the point.
Good Pesach.
Okay. Have a good Pesach, everyone.